What's up, guys? So I posted a picture of what I was doing here in my square body, and it blew up a lot bigger than I anticipated, so I figured I'd make a video breaking down how I'm doing it, what things I ran into, how I got it to work, and show you kind of the behind the scenes of the dash and how I'm mounting it in there and how it fits. Just a quick overview on the build itself. This is my 86 crew cab dually that I'm doing a full build on from the chassis up. Dream truck build, everything you'd ever want in a pickup truck. It's a 12 valve. It's got a 10-speed Eaton Fuller transmission. It's got a brand new rear end out of a 2018 Silverado 3500 HD with a G80 locker, 373 gears, everything you'd ever want. And the interior, I'm doing a full 2019 high country Silverado dash, seats, and console, and the whole 9 yards, just to give it that modern feel inside. And also give it that 12 valve mechanical, diesel powered, and 10 gears to play with, that type thing. The purpose behind the truck is to be a long hauler, cross country truck, to have the comfort, heated and cooled seats, that type thing, in the best looking pickup truck of all time, in my opinion. So I'll break down today what I did with the dashboard to get specific into that. And then it seems like this build's gotten a lot of traction, a lot of interest, so I'll probably make some more videos down the road, kind of breaking down the other parts of the build and show you what I got going on. So I posted that original picture yesterday, just showing the dashboard mocked up in the truck, and I'm still, 3/4 of the way through putting in the truck, but I figured I'll do it midway just to show you the behind the scenes. Right now, it's kind of in its final resting place, mocked up. If you had any questions to see if the 2019 dash will fit width-wise in the truck, it does, and it's down to 1/4 of an inch perfect width-wise. I've got all the trim pieces, obviously, it all fits. Stuff has to get cut. There's a lot of modifications, which I'll show, but to get the proper leg room, the proper height, the proper fit into the truck, and the whole 9 yards, again, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and I figured I'd break it down since I did all the R&D behind it, and this may help somebody else out. So the dashboard itself, I pulled out of a 2019 Silverado High Country that was wrecked. It got rear-ended real hard, and it was in a local auto scrapping place, so I went and was able to get the whole dashboard and seats and everything from it. I also hacked all the connectors off the harness. Anything I could take out of the truck, I basically did in a short period of time. So I was able to get the dashboard out, that type of thing. I actually didn't take the dashboard out. The guys that worked there did. They did a fairly decent job. They didn't bust off a bunch of tabs or destroy it up too bad. The first thing I noticed when I got it out was how flimsy these dashes are. It's basically like a wet noodle. It's just plastic, no structure. The actual structure that's in the truck is welded in like a big skeleton sheet metal brace that thing bolts into. So I'll show you what I did to overcome that, because again, it was even hard to pick this thing up without it wanting to break in half. So on the back side of the dash, I had to make a full custom skeleton to reinforce the whole thing. I probably didn't have to go this crazy, but the last thing I need this thing to do is rattle or squeak or shift around. Well, it's, if I half-assed it and put it in there. Again, I don't want to have any rattles. I'm doing all the soundproofing, that type thing, so trying to make it as comfortable as possible. Getting into it, the first thing I did is I laid it down kind of how it is now and went after just the center part, kind of behind where the radio goes, and reinforced it, putting tabs in wherever there was substantial parts of plastic. And some of these had certain riv nuts, like you can see them up here, for different things that I'm not going to use anymore. So I built a center structure, and the main piece is actually this piece of angle iron that's back here. So this is like 1.25 inch angle iron that with 1/8 inch wall that I welded in here, and it's bolted from the back. And I braced it to these different pickup points on the back center part of the dash to give it a main frame so that I could pick it up and support it by that angle iron there. And this is also serving as the main brace for the dash. This piece of square tubing is actually going to be mounted into the truck and welded, and that's going to be the part where the dash actually is bolted to in the center. So it's got one bolt coming up vertical to that angle iron, and two that come from the other side to these welded nuts. So that's the main brace, and that's bolted in there just now because I'm going to make the brackets to firm mount it into the truck. Again, off that angle iron, I went down, made a couple holes here. A tool that I used a lot was a riv nut tool. If you haven't seen those, it's an awesome investment. You have these rivets that are threaded inside. I used 1/4 inch by 20. These are stainless rivets, and you have your rivet gun here. Forgot what this costs. It's on Amazon. I bought it. You thread the rivet onto here. You drill a hole in a piece of metal. You put it through. You pull the handles out, and you rivet a nut onto there. So you don't have to weld the nuts. That type thing makes it look super factory, super easy. So I use those a lot. I used 1 inch, 1 1/4 flat stock for different pickup points, and put the riv nuts in. And I use these 1/4 inch by 20. I guess they're like fender bolts. They got the captured washers on there. They look super factory. They also have this little shank in the front to help you center the bolts as you put them in. So I use these a lot. They're awesome. I think that's an Amazon job too. So picked up those points. Again, more angle iron. I took this is 1 1/4 inch also, aluminum piece of angle iron, and I epoxied it. I guess this is where the airbag used to go. I cut it out, roughed it up real good, and epoxied this on here so I didn't have to put any bolts from the top to get another mounting point on the top of the dash. Came across, made tabs. Again, picked up any spots that were substantial. And the whole idea was to get 3 main points, the center to mount the main weight of the dashboard and get it held in there nice. And then I'm gonna have these 2 outer points that I'm gonna have mounts to the sides of the cab. These are just in here for centering. These will come out, and they'll have brackets inside the truck to weld and hold the sides to. In here, between the glove boxes, I used a piece of angle iron. Again, some tricky cuts to get around some of the factory bolts that were in there. There were some holes between the glove boxes that I used that you open the glove box and you can get to those holes, open them up to 1/4 inch, and again, put riv nuts in there. Had to cut around these, little bump here. Again, it's a little welded already, rusted already, because as I was welding these, tack welding these braces in, they're bolted directly to plastic, so I used like a foil tape underneath to keep the heat out, and then I had a spray bottle of water, so I would tack it and then spray it with water, keep it cool, make sure I didn't melt anything that I didn't want to melt. On the cluster side of things, I braced the cluster, one here on the bottom, put a rail, same thing with the top, piece of angle iron, and made a bunch of bolts to come through the other side, and same thing on this side, and then picked up a mount on the driver's side as well to mount in the truck. So the idea behind bracing the cluster and having these pickup points is that everything would be reinforced and connected. Everything's triangulated, so it's strong. I also left room for all the vents to come through. I'm making 3D printed adapters to go to each one of those vents to run to the Vintage Air HVAC kit that I have for the truck. Yeah, bracing this around, so this is gonna get cut out, and I'm gonna use the factory cluster, but put, my own gauges in there and make it look as factory as possible, but it gave this enough support where it doesn't need this anymore, and I can cut it out in the future. This piece in the middle here is just temporarily tacked in there, just so it has something to rest on in the truck for when I was mocking it up inside the cab, just so the weight would be taken up by that, and I could shim that and figure out what angle I wanted to put at, and also the height. So looking at the front of the dash as if it would be in the truck. So the outer bracing, it's on the back, can all be taken off. Nothing hooks around anything that makes it that I couldn't take it off once I welded it all together, which is nice. So I'll show you where some of the pickup points were. Again, these are those 1/4 inch bolts that look pretty factory. That's one there. I drilled these holes in the back behind the radio to get to those 3/8 bolts that will eventually mount that main support to that square tubing that'll be welded into the truck. So that's how you get to those. There's one back there. A couple other ones. There's some aluminum that I braced this cluster section with just for extra support, so that sandwiches the plastic. Some bolts in there. In the sides there's 2 there. 2 there. This is what it looks like from the front. So when I put it in, they'll have some brackets again inside the cab that I can mount those bolts to, and then pick up those 3 points to mount the dash. Another spot too is inside the glove box. So I used those factory holes that I think were used to mount them to the original brace inside the Silverado. Those go to that piece of angle iron back there that hold that together. So as far as the modifications inside the cab, this is a custom firewall and tunnel that's to fit the width of the 10-speed Eaton Fuller. I made all this custom, pushed the firewall back. Also made a plate there to get rid of the original HVAC system. I have a block off plate for that. So it's all flat, it's pushed back a little bit to fit the transmission and engine. I tried to get the engine as far back as possible, just to keep the center of the weight inside the truck, also leave enough room for mechanical fans and all that jazz. As far as what has to get modified in here, nothing really. The only thing is there's a captured nut that is kind of like bowed out here. I just cut it and bent it back in, so I'm gonna weld this flat and I'll have a mounting bolt if I ever need that, but that kind of interfered with the side of the dash. But other than that, the width is good. The brace I'm anticipating to brace 2 from there to that square piece of steel and then 2 off the tunnel to get a nice triangulated strength mounting main part there. The gap in the middle will let me run my HVAC hoses from the vintage air kit and that type thing. On the driver's side, I had to lower the steering column brace about 1/2 inch to get through the dashboard. The dashboard's a lot taller, so I ran into an issue where that steering column would have hit just the bottom of that cluster mount. So I drop it like 1/2 inch, I just slid it there, bent it down a little bit. That made me had to modify the pedal assembly to move the bolt in a hair, so I had to use a die grinder to open those slots up, and also had to modify the top there and cut some stuff out, but that'll all be rebraced once it finally goes together. Where I'm going to make those L brackets to mount the bottom sides of the dash or against the side kick panels there. I do the same thing with that nut on that side. But other than that, just put the windshield trim, the rubber gasket in just to see what it would look like once the windshield was in there, so I get all those cuts right and everything like that. So to suck the dashboard as far forward as I can go, I obviously had to cut the top of the dash. In the center there is a pretty fair amount. This is a piece I pulled out of the garbage, but this is what was on there. Use an angle grinder to make that nice cut. If you're wondering, it does a real nice job cutting this edge. This is just a little burr here. But the angle grinder, instead of using like a jigsaw blade or anything like that, makes a nice edge, real clean. It actually melts some of the plastic too, makes a nice finished edge. I didn't originally have it cut this much, but I had to move it back and back just to get enough pedal room and make it look, ideal and factory. So I had to move that up a little bit. So my plan for the top of the dash is to use the original vents that came with the vintage air kit that went to the original defroster, I believe, and that fits almost perfect in this spot here. And that I'm going to cut it from the back and mount this to act as my defroster. There's also a small cut up here that was for the heads-up display in the original High Country. So this actually works perfect too, where I'll have my own defroster on the driver's side. So I'll have 2 vents, one in the middle and one just directly above the driver's side. It's up in New York here, it gets cold. I do a lot of snowmobiling, so defroster's gonna be key, making sure that works, and those worked out nicely. So I'm gonna wrap this video up here. Hopefully that was helpful. I'll make another video as we go on, but I guess this will be part 1. I've also had the back seat. I've got it fully mounted. The High Country, the new Silverado seats fold up. The back part gets hung on there. Real nice setup. I had to make all kinds of mounts and make it real nice. So I'll go into that too, probably in a separate video. But after I get the dash in, just got a console coming, which is like the jump seat one. Make the front brackets for the seats, which nice is the front seats in the new Silverados are fairly low profile. They actually sit real low. So I don't think I'm gonna have to chop those humps that much or at all to get them sitting perfect. I put one in on the driver's side when the dashboard mocked up, and all the steering column was perfect. The gauge angle to see the gauges in the cluster perfect. As I said before, I'm gonna have to cut above the pedals a little bit to get a little more pedal room. Driver's side's good. Test with the girlfriend. She's got long legs. She fits just fine. So yeah, I'll keep you guys updated in the build. I might do a breakdown of what's outside too, as far as the rolling chassis right now, and all the custom fabrication, all the work that went into that. If you have any questions, leave a comment. I'll try to respond to everyone best I can. If you hate what I'm doing and you like the old dash and you want to shit on this, go for it. I love reading those comments too. So go wild. And yeah, any questions, let me know what you think. I'll see you guys in the next one.